North Carolina is still searching for front court help. Can they coax Coleman Hawkins out of the NBA draft?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, May 9th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. A special shout out to all of you everydayers out there, as well as all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, we've got a dual show Thursday. Right now, I'll introduce our guest in just a second. We're talking about Coleman Hawkins today. On our other main show, Coach Rob will be joining me as he does every Thursday. That'll be a lot of fun as well. Big thanks to all of you again for reaching out who have been praying for our family in the midst of some crazy weather. In fact, Cameron, the guest today, and I had to push back about half an hour from when we were going to record because tornado sirens were going off and I had to go to my safe space. So it's a whole thing. Anyway, thank you for sticking with us, folks. Joining us today, Cameron Salerno, college basketball writer, amongst other things at CBS Sports. Been doing that about a year now, right, Cam? If I'm thinking about timelines correctly.
Joined last May, so it has been a little over a year. It's pretty surreal, and it is weird, I will say, not watching live games after, the grind of March Madness and conference tournament week and everything else in between and the first week of the transfer portal. It's weird to not have to kind of keep up with everything that's going on. I mean, obviously stuff is going on. The NBA draft combine is coming up, and, stay or go decision is going to be the next kind of big step in college basketball. But for the most part, it's kind of too quiet right now, and it's kind of weird.
Honestly. Well, here in Carolina land, it's not too quiet because the Tar Heels need help in the front court. So it's cool. Cam's joining us today from his hometown bedroom in Sacramento, California. Gracious enough to join us even while he's out on vacay. If you're not familiar with Cameron's work, he is a real up-and-comer on the national scene, does great stuff. Already is a stud, but is going to be even more so. So make sure you check out all his great work on CBS Sports. But also, critically, for today's conversation, grew up about 15 minutes from Illinois' Coleman Hawkins. And so I reached out and I said, Cam, look, I need you to come on the show because the Carolina fan base is all up in arms about Coleman Hawkins. There's hope that he could be the guy, but some people are like, I don't know, do we want him, do we not? So we got to have a whole big conversation today. Cameron, let's start off with just some words that your colleague at CBS, Matt Norlander, said recently on a CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball podcast. Quote, Coleman Hawkins, it sounds like, is Arkansas, Carolina, Louisville, Kansas State. There could be others. He will command a very, very high NIL price if he really does, though, want to go the NBA route. But I'd say the buzz on Hawkins at this stage is more likely than not that he would return to college, although, as with all things, it's no sure thing. So, Cameron, here's where I want to start out with you. Right now, Coleman Hawkins is in the NBA draft, but right at basically the transfer portal deadline, entered into the transfer portal as well. So my question to you, do you think Carolina or anybody will be able to coax him out of the NBA draft?
I say, if this was 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would say absolutely not. But with NIL and, teams, boosters be able to offer, X amount of money to players, there's a very, very realistic chance that Coleman could make more money in college next year than he would in the NBA. I mean, when you get drafted in the second round, you most likely get a two-way contract, and there's no guarantee that you get playing time in the NBA. Those are obviously non-guaranteed deals, or at least some of them aren't. And it's kind of risky business. And if Coleman does return to college, he would be one of the best players in the country. He'd make a lot of money at NIL. And plus, you get another chance to chase a national championship. So I think he's a very interesting player. I mean, obviously, I've known him for a few years now. I mean, he went to Antelope High School for the first 2 years of his high school rather. And I went to Wood Creek, which is like 10 minutes away. It's in the same school district. Really good family, great person. Then he went to public prep in Napa, which I also know those people really well. And so just really good family, really good person. And I think whatever he decides, it's going to be good for him and his family.
So we're going to watch all that. And I mean, part of the issue, Cameron, and this is the weird thing about roster construction that you and I both know so well, the potential problem is the waiting game that Carolina would have to do with him. The deadline for early entrants to pull out of the NBA draft isn't until May 29th. As we record, that's literally 3 weeks away still, 21 days at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. Now, obviously, he could pull out and come back to school before that if the price or the landing spot is right. But Carolina right now needs bigs, and you don't want to have to wait. But if he's your guy, you wait. How do you deal with that?
It's really tricky because it's kind of like the same situation. I mean, it's obviously not the same, and obviously Kentucky never went through with it, but it's kind of the same dilemma as, do you wait for Billy Donovan to finish up his season if he is the guy, which obviously he probably wasn't because they hired Mark Pope. But in the same sense, if Coleman Hawkins is the guy who they want to, play the 4 or play the 5 and kind of be that Armando Bacot filler, then you do wait. And, there is a chance that he, I'm not saying like him in particular, but a lot of guys after the NBA Combine next week will pull out of the draft because they got the feedback they were looking for, maybe weren't looking for, as far as, you probably would be a late second round pick. You probably would go undrafted. It's smarter to return to school. So who knows what kind of feedback he's going to get. I was very convinced last year that he was going to go through with the NBA draft. Ironically, I was back home in Sacramento last summer, and unironically, I ran into him at an ice cream shop in Sacramento, and I was talking about him like to my friends, like, yeah, like this guy might go to the draft. He's from Sacramento, and I kid you not, literally a minute later, he walked into the place and we talked for a little bit. And I think the next day he was going to work out for the Warriors, and then obviously ended up going back to school. But I was really surprised last cycle he went back. So I would say right now it wouldn't really surprise me if he did go back to school just because of the logistics, and you can make a lot more money.
Cam, you just brought this up, and I'm so glad you did, because this is where I want to go next. I think the biggest conversation that North Carolina fans are having, and by the way, we've had you on Locked On College Basketball. You're a rookie on Locked On Tar Heels, man. It's great to have you. We're so glad you're on, and I know lots of folks are excited to hear you. But the question that so many Carolina fans have about Coleman Hawkins is not only do the Tar Heels need to replace Armando Bacot, as you just said, but also Harrison Ingram. There's debate about whether that's already on the roster. Could Jalen Washington be the starting 5? Things like that. In your opinion, having watched Coleman both in high school and now in these years at Illinois, do you think he better fits as a 4 or a 5 for the North Carolina Tar Heels?
I think he's more of a 4 because I think he can be a connector. He has the ability to stretch the floor and shoot. Maybe the percentages aren't amazing, but he has shown ability to knock down a shot from outside. He's kind of that point forward that you kind of covet at the next level. I mean, he has an ability to, pass the ball at a high level, put the ball on the floor. And so I think he projects more of as a 4, at least in the NBA and in college as well. I know he did play the 5 a lot for Illinois just because that's just how the roster was constructed. And I think he can play the 5, and I think he is capable of playing that small ball center role. But I would say in his more natural position, he is a 4. I don't know how he feels about it. I don't know how other coaching staffs feel about it. But if I were like a person constructing a roster, I'd probably put him at the 4. I really don't know what kind of center you'd want to play next to him per se. I mean, because of his ability to stretch the floor, you can probably get away with having a non-shooter at the center position because, he has the ability to stretch the floor, like I said. And when you have 2 non-shooters on the floor at 4 or 5, it gets kind of dicey, especially if other players on your team can't really shoot well either.
That's right. Because you've got RJ Davis who can do that, and Cade Tyson who's transferred in that can, but we know there's question marks with Elliot Cadeau shooting at the 1. And so you can't have both your 4 and 5 be non-shooters. And so I think that's a great point you bring up. Not to mention, for Hawk, he shot 36.9% from three last year on 4.6 attempts per game, but prior to that had never shot over 30% from three. So which is the reality? We'll have to see on that. Cam, part of it is I love your point there about it's all going to depend on who is your 5 beside him, or if you do slot him in as a 5, like almost out of necessity, since Carolina has not been able to get the likes of Cliff Omori or Jonas Adu, Umar Ballo, etc. Maybe you out of necessity play him at the 5 and find somebody else at the 4. So we'll have to wait and see on that too. Now, here's where I want to go next. We'll have an ad read here in just a second. But Cameron, I know one of the questions that a lot of people have is there's like this weird misconception about his personality and his fiery disposition. I'd love for you to clear that up. You just talked some about his personality, but help people wrap their brains around who this young man really and truly is. And so Cameron and I are going to have that conversation in just a second. Right after I tell you about Yahoo Finance. For many years, I had my own financial spreadsheet on Excel. I was trying to track all my various finances. It was so much time and energy and effort trying to keep it up with it all. And I remember wishing, can something help put this all together for me? Well, then my financial advisor, he tells me that he does all of that through Yahoo Finance. He just simply plugs it in. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. I gave it a go. I loved it. And I've never looked back since. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. So whether you're a seasoned investor or you're just looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, all of it, every type of portfolio you have. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength at Yahoo Finance is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The number one financial destination, yahoofinance.com. One more time, that's yahoofinance.com. We're talking about Coleman Hawkins. Can Carolina get him? Would he be a potential front court guy? 100%. But there's this odd perception out there, Cameron Salerno, about Coleman Hawkins and who he is and how he conducts himself. Had a lot of great questions from the Locked On Tar Heels Discord about Coleman. And so I want to share some of those. And we'll do this one from Determined Drew, who cleverly has the backwards 3 for the E in Drew. He asks this: Cameron, I'd love to know misconceptions on Coleman's personality as coming across negatively to some fans instead of just being a passionate player. Cam, can you speak to that for us?
Yeah, I mean, Coleman is a great dude. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I know him. Everyone you talk to around him, from his coaches to, players that he played against. And I thought it was really interesting when the Kings drafted Keegan Murray, he reached out of nowhere and said, the Kings should draft this guy. I played against him. He's really good. And I mean, obviously Iowa and Illinois are pretty big Big Ten rivals. So for him to say that, I thought was really interesting. But I know it just maybe in recent years, he's kind of become a troll on Twitter or X or whatever you call it now. But he's a really good guy and just really cares and is a really passionate player. And I feel like you don't really see that a lot in today's game. I mean, you don't really see a lot of guys not only just stay 4+ years, but also to have that kind of follow him. I mean, I feel like he's kind of picked up that maybe misconception over the last maybe year or two, ever since Illinois kind of took that next jump and became, they obviously won the Big Ten, I believe, his sophomore year in 2021 and 2022 season or something like that. But he's kind of, ever since he's gone into the starting role and become kind of a more impact player for Illinois, I think the perception is kind of carried on with him. But yeah, he is a troll, but he is pretty funny too. And I think a lot of college basketball fans, he's just that kind of player. I think you either love him or you hate him.
Yep. And I would imagine if he's on your team, you love him. And so, Cameron, let me ask you this. This one comes also from the Discord from EHOF15, who says, and you kind of alluded to this, but I want to dig in a little more on it because let me even set the question up. In the transfer portal, Carolina has had some of these guys that are either fiery or keep teammates accountable or, rally the troops, whatever it is. Brady Manick did some of that this past year. That was very much Cormac Ryan. I know a lot of Carolina people before they had him were like, Cormac Ryan, you kidding me? I don't like him, right? Same with Harrison Ingram, this fiery, passionate dude. And so you look at Coleman Hawkins, and here's Ehof's question. How do his teammates and coaches feel about him? Do they feed off of that energy?
See, I can't speak to that entirely. Just but what I've heard and what I've examined is like a lot of his teammates love him and his coaches love him too. I want to say it was like he was. I don't want to like the exact stat, but like he was one of the only 4-year players that like has stayed at Illinois and like been that impact player for under Underwood at Illinois. And so I think that says a lot about him too, just how, I don't want to like sound like a boomer, but like in today's age, a lot of players transfer out, like if they don't get the opportunity immediately. And so for him to kind of not ride the bench, but not kind of step up in his role, and now, was a full-time starter last year and a full-time starter the year before, he kind of had to wait for that role. So it really says a lot about him that he not only stayed at Illinois. I know he's a Chicago Bears fan, so like that's a big part of it. But it really says a lot about his character that he stuck around at Illinois when he could have probably, gone to a different school and been a full-time starter sooner. So just based off like what everyone has said, I mean, I think his teammates love him and his coaches love him, and people who have coached him in the past and people who played with him, at the AAU, high school, or in college level, they love him too. So I think he's just a really good dude. And then, like I said, like there's misconceptions about him, but until you actually get to know the guy, like I think it's people make assumptions and people jump to conclusions.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. You got to get to like so often it's just like, dude, I'm out here having fun. I'm just being a dork and I'm enjoying it. And so get off me. Right. So here's another one. And I like this question too, Cam, because one of the things for North Carolina is, you've got a lot of upperclassmen dudes, but you're always looking for more leadership. And so the Nintender asks this, quote, how is Coleman Hawkins' leadership? Is he more vocal in his leadership or more lead by example or a little bit of both? And I said the Nintendo. I think my computer auto-corrected. It's the Nintendo nerd. And so that's even better. So more vocal, more lead by example, or a little bit of that mix on the soft serve ice cream where you get chocolate and vanilla together.
I think he's definitely both. I think he definitely has shown he can be a vocal leader, but like his teammates kind of follow his lead. And so it kind of falls into both categories. And, I was thinking about this today, and I actually just wrote a story about this today too. So since 2011 in the 24/7 sports era, that's like a recruiting service we use at CBS, there's been 10 instances where 2 top 5 players have been signed by the same school in the same class. This year we have Rutgers with Ace Bailey and Harper.
That's right.
And Duke has, obviously Cooper Flag. But if you look at how the previous 8 teams have fared, it's not a lot of success. Outside of Anthony Davis's Kentucky team in 2012, no one else has, I think, gone as far. I mean, the Kentucky team 2 years later, which had Julius Randle and the Harrison twins, which they were all top 5 recruits, went to the Final Four, but their road to the Final Four was odd. I forget if they were the 7 or the 8 seed. I know they played UConn in the title game that year. But a lot of teams, I mean, I think 5 of the 8 lost in the first or second round of the tournament. So why am I saying this? Because when you have young talent, I mean, I think there's been a shift over the last few years, ever since the transfer portal became a thing, that you can't just win with a bunch of talented freshmen. You have to have veterans around him. And so with North Carolina having this influx of young talent, especially with Elliot Cadeau, who, I'm very high on him. I think he's going to make a huge jump. If he can just learn how to shoot a little better, he's going to be really good. But my point is, you need veterans like that on your team, and I think Coleman fits that mold. And so if you're trying to win a national title, if you're trying to make a deep run in the NCAA tournament, no matter what program you are, if you're North Carolina or NC State or any program, like big or small, like you have to have veteran leaders. And with like Oakland's team that beat Kentucky, like Trey Townsend, like that's a veteran player. Like Jack Olke, like veteran player. And Kentucky obviously is way more talented than Oakland, but the better team won in the sense
Better
where
team won. That's critical.
exactly. And it's not just talent. Like talent-wise, Kentucky was way better than Oakland. But team talent, like play style, way they play together, leadership, all that stuff, Oakland had the edge. And so that's basically my point. Like the whole why am I saying this? Because you need guys like Coleman Hawkins on your team if you want to win a championship. So I think the veteran aspect is super important. And not a lot of like fifth year seniors who have that kind of experience and have that kind of pedigree of playing the Big Ten for 4 years. Like they're not going to, those players don't grow on trees. Like you are, and if they do, you're paying $1.5-2 million at NIL to land them. So, yeah.
Okay. So Cameron just said you need guys like this on your team. Yes. But what does that mean? What does that look like specifically with Coleman Hawkins? What does he bring to the table? What could he mean for the Tar Heels in this lineup? Got several questions for Cam just about that exact thing. What would Coleman Hawkins bring? We'll get to that in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. How about a little 2025 national championship odds while we're looking ahead? Kansas right now leads the way at plus 1,000. UConn right behind them at plus 1,100, followed by Duke at plus 1,200. Alabama and all their recent acquisitions at plus 1,500. And then Carolina, Baylor, Houston, and Gonzaga all tied at plus 1,800. Why don't you go ahead and get an early jump on that? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we want to talk just a little bit here as we get to the end of the show about what Cameron believes that Coleman would add to North Carolina. So, Cam, this one comes from Andrew E. He says, what does Cameron believe Coleman would contribute to the team? And what do you believe that Hawk would receive in return as a committed teammate?
I would say that he is a proven veteran, obviously. That's the first thing to start. You have that veteran leadership with him. Second, he's a willing defender, and he has shown the ability to guard multiple positions, 2 through 5. He can play the 5, he can play the 4, so he's position versatile. He has shown the ability to stretch the floor as a shooter, and so I think there's a lot of different lineup combinations you can play. You can play him next to a non-shooter at the 5. You can play him next to a guy who can stretch the floor a little bit at the 5. There's like ultimate combinations, and he can also probably play the 3 too. Maybe if you're playing a larger lineup. So I say that's the main things he brings to the table. But like I said, I think if his shooting kind of stabilizes a little bit, and he really shows a consistency to hit shots from outside, there's no reason why he can't take another huge leap this year.
Right with you. I love it. And we even saw a leap last year at the free throw line too, from under 70% his whole career to almost 80% last year, just shy of that at 79.2%. Cam, obviously no player is created perfectly. No player is currently perfect. And Russo has a great question for us to that end. Russo says, what are some in-game tendencies that Coleman needs to still work on?
I would say, just like I said, the shooting. Like I think it's something that needs to stabilize, and having a stretch big is a luxury, I would say. Just there's a lot of different players who like it's like a lab, like you get to choose 3 of the 5 options, and Coleman's a proven defender. He has a high motor, he's a connector, and so if you can kind of stabilize the shooting and bring it up to a level that's consistent, and he's obviously shooting a lot more shots, I don't think it's going to be the same kind of role, but like a Cormac Ryan, like if he kind of can play that shooting role, because Harrison Ingram also even improved his shooting this year, which I thought was really impressive. And I think the one thing that North Carolina is going to miss is the rebounding from Harrison. Like as a wing rebounder, like I don't think there's many players better in this upcoming draft, and so that makes him very, very valuable. at the next level. Just, wings are so coveted in the NBA these days. And so I think that's what Coleman can improve on. But at the same time, too, like, he kind of has shown what he can do. And, it's just kind of putting those players around him. And I think he would thrive at North Carolina.
I love it. This, a couple questions kind of going back to the high school version of Coleman Hawkins. This one comes from Speed Racer MG. What were Coleman's greatest strengths coming into college, and what has he improved in the most, in your opinion?
I think his athleticism is really strong. I mean, like I said, there's not many 6'10" athletic wings / centers who can, play at his level that are available every day. Like, those kind of players either go to the draft or they stay in school, or they stay at their respective school, unless, you're at like Northern Colorado, like Dalton Connect, and you transfer up to Tennessee. I don't remember. I got to watch him a few times in high school because he obviously was at Antelope, which is like 10 minutes away from me. I'm 2 years older than him technically, which kind of dates me and him. But so I got to see him a little bit in high school. And I remember like a lot of my friends would be like, have you heard of this Coleman Hawkins guy? Like, he's pretty good. And I want to say he got offered by Arizona. Like it was one of his first offers. That's this when Sean Miller was running the show, still Arizona. And so, I mean, Arizona was at that time really good still. And obviously they are really good today, but there's kind of that like weird transition period, towards the end of Sean Miller's tenure at Arizona. But I thought that's what really jumped out to me. Like, whenever I see someone getting offered like Arizona, it's always like, oh, okay, this guy must be pretty good.
Yeah.
And obviously, when you go to Perfect Prep, which is like one of the top prep schools in the entire country, I mean, Jalen Green's gone there. Gary Trent Jr.'s gone there. Josh Jackson's gone there. So a lot of really proven names have come out of that prep school. So for him to transfer there, I mean, he obviously had to be very good, and obviously was. So that's what I kind of remember about him. I mean, I wish I got to watch him a little bit more in high school.
Yeah.
It's definitely like, I think there's a certain sense of pride from Sacramentians. Like, if you're from Sacramento, like, you're gonna,
you're a king.
Yeah, definitely, literally, figuratively. So, yeah, I know. I am curious if he stays in the draft, if he does have a workout with the Kings. I know it's kind of, he joked that, he hopes the Kings draft him one day. This is a while ago, a while back, but yeah, really good dude. Really good family too. I mean, his whole family's is full of Hoopers. His dad was a Hooper in college.
Right.
So just a good guy in general.
Well, and that's the kind of thing that Hubert Davis is looking for, man. He, wants these really connected, family-loving, family-cherishing sorts of people. But, Cameron, I think the biggest thing that sticks out to me, and I just put this together actually earlier today, Tyler Hansborough refers to himself now as the Big Hawk. He has his own podcast where he's at that. We've had him here on Locked On Tar Heels, and we called him Big Hawk. So I think it only makes sense and lines up. It's meant to be. The Big Hawk, the leading scorer in Carolina history, is calling the Coleman Hawkins Hawk home to come be a Tar Heel. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think you can get any better insight than that,
Yeah, definitely.
Cameron Salerno, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all on Locked On Tar Heels Discord for all your great questions. I know we didn't get to all of them. I apologize for that. Maybe Cameron, we can answer them some other time, some other way, or something like that. There was a groundswell to make you come join our Discord. So
I appreciate it.
Just know that the invite is out there. Folks, make sure you reach out to Cameron on Twitter, on X. Follow him, Cameron Salerno 1. Go follow all his great writing again for CBS Sports. Cameron, anything else you want to plug?
I mean, just read my work on CBS. Like, it's the off season now. I mean, I'm excited for the NBA draft. I will say Harrison Ingram is one of my favorite second round prospects. I mean, I watched him a little bit at Stanford, before he transferred to North Carolina. So that's a guy who thinks he's very underrated. Like I said, Elliot Cadeau, really high on him. I think he's going to be a really good player. I think have that second year growth if he can, shoot a little bit better. But besides that, just can't wait for next season.
That's right. Add in some Ian Jackson, some Drake Powell. Should be a great combination. That backward is loaded. All right, folks. Again, make sure you go follow all of Cameron's great works. Check him out on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. And don't forget, we've got another episode today. Make sure you go see that, listen to it, watch it as well. If you haven't subscribed to our show, so easy to do on both the audio and video platforms. you haven't joined that Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, so easy. It's free to do, and the link is in the show notes. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. We'd love to have you. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll be back again tomorrow. Myself and Coach Pat Kilby will be on. But until then, peace.